Over the last couple years, I have written 6 issues of my comic book Project Punk, fully edited them, and now I'm in the process of reaching out to artists. In this video, I'm going to break down step by step how I got to that point and how you can do the same. So let's get started. Sup peoples, and welcome back to another video. If you can hear someone leaf blowing in the background, I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do about that. If you can't though, that's cool, and we can move on to the next part of this video. So I'm going to be walking you through the 5 steps that I use to get from concept to 6 written issues of comic book. And the first step of that is to know your story. Now, I don't mean that you have to know every single little step along the way, but you should know point A and point B, the beginning and the end. I think that to write a good story, you really need to know the end before you begin. That's always my #1 writing tip, is know the end before you begin. Think about how many times stories have fallen flat because they didn't know where they were going. Think about Game of Thrones or Lost. Knowing the end before you begin means that you can fill in those blank spaces along the road. It means that they're not fully blank spaces, they're just question marks with vague ideas behind them. If you have even a vague idea of a scene or a plot point that you need to hit, it's a lot easier to come up with that than just start at the beginning and start writing and have no idea where you're going. But if you have a destination, you can figure out the steps along the way. That's what I did with my own series, Project Punk. I know the first scene, and I know the last scene, and now I'm just working my way along to get to that last scene. And I'm letting things naturally unfold and see where they go as I go along, and that way it's feeling like I have a goal, I have a thing pushing my characters forward, and I know where they're going, but I can figure out what towns they stop at along the way. Once you know the end, you can move on to the next stage, which is your first part of outlining. But, I do want to say a quick shout out to our not actually sponsor, because I'm not a big enough channel to be sponsored yet, but it didn't feel right to make this video without saying that I learned everything that I know about writing comic books from the back of a saga book written by Brian K. Vaughan and illustrated by Fiona Staples. So if this video seems like a great tool for learning, then you should go read their books, because I couldn't be doing any of this if I hadn't have, 1, read those books and decided to become a writer, and 2, if Brian Vaughan hadn't included Saga issue 4's script in the back of that book for me to learn from. Now, on from that not actually sponsored segment, let's get into the next session, which is outlining your 6-issue arc. Now, if you are new to comic book writing, you might not know why I would say a 6-issue arc specifically. So basically, most of the time in comics, there are specific numbers. Because each comic comes out monthly, unless you're doing a graphic novel, which has different rules, I'm talking about a monthly comic. So a monthly comic is approximately 20 to 22 pages, usually 20 or 22, not really 21. I don't think I've ever seen a 21-page comic, but 20 or 22 pages, and it comes out once a month. Now, every 6 issues, those individual 6 little 20-page things, will be compiled into one larger volume, which is 6 of them in a little paperback, and this is called a trade paperback. Now, occasionally, 3 of those trade paperbacks will be placed into a hardcover volume, but I don't think that all series necessarily do that. So I'm just going to be focusing on the trade paperback. So a trade paperback is 6 months worth of comic, or 6 issues worth, aka 120 pages. To have a satisfying arc for your story, you should do a little bit of planning. So when I decided to write the first 6 issues of my comic series, Project Punk, I sat down and I outlined the 6-issue arc. This means that each trade paperback that you have will feel like a cohesive mini bit of your story. And then if you go even further and plan out 18 issues with 3 mini arcs inside of them, let's view it this way. Each issue is one small section of you telling a story. It should have a tiny arc inside of it, a tiny story. Now, 6 of those should go together to create one medium-sized story. 3 of those should go together to become one larger arc in your story. This is what Saga does really well. Every single issue feels like it has a mini story inside of it, a little chapter of the story. Then each 6-issue arc feels like it has a slightly larger arc in it. It feels like by the time that you finish that, you've gotten to a new part of the story. It feels like a part. Now, once you combine 3 of those 6-issue arcs, that feels like you've read a whole book and a lot has happened, and now you're on to the next book. So if it was novels, each issue would be a chapter, each trade paperback would be a part, and then each 18-issue arc, so hardcover, would be an entire book in a series. Hopefully that made sense. Now, talking about the actual plotting of this. I do it fairly simply, and this is the method that Brian Vaughan mentioned and why I ended up doing it. So I will just take the 6 issues. I will write down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on a piece of paper, and then I will write something next to each one of them. So let's say that my storyline is about a dog who needs to get home, okay? Issue 1, dog gets lost. Issue 2, dog begins making way home. Issue 3, some sort of drama. Like maybe dog gets taken to pound. Issue 4, dog escapes from pound. Issue 5, dog nears home. Issue 6, dog arrives. This creates a steady arc. It means that every single issue feels separate, like its own chapter, but it's all cohesive and leading towards the same thing. Now, if I was going to do an 18-issue arc, then maybe I would add 2 more sections, and when the dog got home, it would be revealed in the next 6 issues that the family had moved while he was away, and it would detail the story of him tracking his family until finally he arrived at their new home in the final set of 6 issues, only to realize that they had thought that he was gone and gotten a new dog. And it's about him being brought back into the family, but having to come to terms with this new dog. And then the arc ends with him being friends with this new dog, home with his family, happy at last. That's a weird example, but let's go with it. So in this way, you can make sure that you're going to have a satisfying 6-issue arc without a ton of planning. It's not like I'm asking you to sit down and know every single scene that happens. It's more like a broad outline of the overarching thing that you have to accomplish in this issue for the story to keep moving forward. Next, we are on to the next bit of outlining. Take the first issue, take that little number 1 and what you're going to do with it, and begin writing again. So take another piece of paper, write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, until you have a total of numbered lines equal to the number of pages that you're going to put into your series. Now for me, this means 22. I initially started with 20, but it's surprising how much more story you could fit in with just 2 pages. So I ended up going with 22. We're gonna write down what happens on every single page. I don't think that you need to do this forever, but I think it's a good way to figure things out when you're just starting. I did this for my first issue, and my second issue, and my third issue, but by my 4th, 5th, 6th, I knew enough about my writing method that I could just sit down and write it just from having like a single line of text telling me what I needed to do in that issue. But in the beginning, I think that outlining all the pages individually can really help you. Let's take the dog example again. Let's say that I have my I'm just going to go with 20 pages because it's easier for this example. So let's say that I decided I'm going to do a 20-page comic, and this is issue 1, in which the dog gets lost. I'm not asking you to lay out every single thing, but you should have a brief understanding of what's going to go on every single page. In this example, let's say that I put a block in pages 1, 2, and 3 for the dog getting lost, okay? I'm just like, the dog's going to get lost in those. I have to get you into the story, have things happen. Dog gets lost. Then on page 4, 5, and 6, and 7, I decide to get a little bit more detail. Like, okay, well, on page 4, the dog finds the toy the ball that it had been chasing when it got lost. And on page 5, it starts going home when it takes a wrong turn and realizes that it is lost. Page 6 is the dog panicking about being lost. I feel bad for this dog. I'm so sorry, dog. Page 7 is it getting dark and the dog has to find shelter for the night. This feels like we're making progress, right? I'm laying things out scene by scene and knowing what has to happen. So then I just continue along like this until I've got the whole 20 pages briefly mapped out. And of course you can change this as you go along. Maybe you realize that one page needs to be a little bit longer, so you squeeze something in or you take something out. And basically you just figure it all out. You can deal with figuring out the exacts later on, but this is just to give you a brief outline so you don't run into any dead ends while you're writing. Then once you've done this 20-page outline, we get onto the actually fun bit. Not that this isn't fun. I enjoy the entire writing process, so I'm probably the wrong one to ask what is and isn't fun about writing. I even like editing, so. But I will say that this is probably the best bit coming up next, which is actually writing the thing. And I'm going to walk you through what a script looks like, and I will put up an example on the screen. This is not my series, so don't get excited. This is just a test comic page that I made. So if the writing's terrible, please don't come for me. Alrighty, so I have a picture of it up on my phone, and I'm going to walk you through what each different section means. So first up, we put the comic's name and the issue number. Then you put a comma and you put the page number. Now I like to color code mine because I think that it makes it easier to read and easier to see, but you don't have to if you're writing on pencil and paper, or if you just don't feel like changing the colors in your Google Doc or whatever it is. But I've just found that it makes my thing look a little bit neater and a little bit easier for me to keep track of things. Next, you put a space down and you're onto the panels. Now each panel is one of those little squares that the comic has. So I put panel 1, and then below that you put the panel's description, and then you go into any dialogue that's going to be in that panel. So you put the dialogue number, as in the number that you want it to be read in that order. So if I had 2 bubbles of dialogue on that page, and one was 1 and one was 2, dialogue 1 would be higher, so you read it first, and then dialogue 2 would be below, so you read them in the proper order. It's just notes to your artist and your letterer, basically. But you number the entire page in sequential order, so it doesn't reset with each panel. Then I just repeat this process going along. Now you can bold certain things and then they'll bold them in the comic. I believe you can do this with italics as well, although I don't think that I've seen that as often. I definitely see a lot of bolded things. And this is also when you decide whether you want it to be all capitals or if you want it to be lowercase. I personally prefer lowercase because I don't know, I didn't grow up with old comics where everything was capitalized, so it looks like yelling. Also, I think that if you do it lowercase, then you can capitalize things for extra effect. So now if my character yells, I don't have to just show that with an exclamation point. I can show that with capitalized bolded letters. I also use bolding to put emphasis on certain words, just trying to give them a bit of a tone of voice. Now, I think that a good rule of thumb is to have maybe 5, 6, 7 panels per page maximum. You totally do not have to do that. I've seen comics with way more panels than that, and I've seen comics with less. However, sometimes I'll look at a page and it'll have so many panels on there, it's all so squeezed in, the text so tight, or maybe so much is happening that it just becomes sort of like my brain is like, I don't know how to read this. But when I see a comic page like Saga or Paper Girls, and it's all very neat and tidy, it's like 5 panels maximum, my brain can just take it in a little bit better, and I think it looks neater. Like I said, this is a personal taste thing. So then you basically just repeat this page process over and over and over for all of the pages. If you want to know a little bit more about specific comic book terminology, like what gutters are or how to use a splash page, you can check out the video that I will put on the screen now. And if you want to check out the first time that I made a how to write a comic book video, I'll put that up there too, because I still think that that video is good, and I think my example that I used is better than the one that I used with the dog. But I wanted to do this video again with an actual example of a script. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope that the videos on the screen will help you out, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.